Hello, George Freestone. Pleased to be back with you for episode 21 of Our Baseball Journey, the story of my wife Carol and my visit to all 30 current Major League parks. And today's visit takes us to Miller Park in Milwaukee. You can see it behind me from the outside of the ballpark, and it gives you a good view of the roof apparatus up top. Miller Park has the ability to be like many of the other parks that we visited, either open or closed. And the roof structure that you see there will enter into the game description a little bit later when we talk about what actually transpired at the game. For those of you who watched episode 20, which was talking about the intra-city game between the Cubs and the White Sox in Chicago, you'll know that this trip had us on a drive first to Chicago, where we enjoyed that game and visiting with our family there. We then drove north to Milwaukee, right along the lake, enjoyed this game and a couple of attractions within the city of Milwaukee that we'll talk about. Then we turned around and drove back home, but we had to stop by in Cleveland for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Now, my garb today, I have a Milwaukee Brewers polo shirt on. You can see the emblem on my shirt pocket. I also have a Arizona Diamondbacks cap. That was the opponent for the Brewers in Miller Park. And as I share my screen here with you, I'm going to talk about one thing first before we get into the slides. This is the link that you will get if you get a link to my playlist. And here you can see all previous 20 episodes. But I refer frequently to the slides, and I talk from the slides in each one of these episodes. And I wanted to point out where you can actually find the slides in the playlist. It's not the best of all solutions, but it's right here. If you click on more, you'll see the description of the playlist. But then below that, you'll see that the slides can be found in this location. And what you would need to do is copy and paste that information into your browser, and it will take you to an image of the slides, a PDF of the slides that we've talked from. Okay. Now let's go to the slide in that collection for Miller Park. Let's move me kind of into the center here. And again, this was in July of 2016. I'm just going to jump in and start talking from the bullets over on the left after I just make the reminder that more photos, several hundred from Milwaukee, are available here. And if you click on this section of the slide, you will be able to get to a box score from the game. Okay. Before we get into describing some of the pictures that you see on this slide, I do have a trivia question, and it is the first bullet. Can you name the teams that have played in both the American and the National League within the Major League Baseball? Well, I wouldn't be asking this question, you would think, if the Brewers weren't one of them. And indeed, the Brewers were one. They made the transition from the American League to the National League in 1998 to facilitate just having the proper number of teams for competition and for playoffs and postseason in each of the different divisions. The second of only two teams to make a switch between the different leagues went the other way. The Astros in 2013 moved from the National League to the American League. And so Many episodes ago, I talked to you about a visit to the Astrodome. At that time, of course, the Astros were playing in the National League. Okay, let's start just by highlighting a few pictures from this slide about the ballpark and the game. This is another shot of Miller Park. Again, this is a solarization just to emphasize certain things like the sky, but you can see the roof as well. Let's see. This is a view from inside, of course, showing you where we sat, and it highlights for you that once again, just as I highlighted in the Chicago game, we are starting to be faced by the protective netting that prevents errant foul balls from injuring some of the fans that might not be paying close attention to an incoming foul ball. It's a little bit more difficult to see here, but you can clearly see it here as a Brewer is batting against the Diamondbacks. That that netting, although good for providing protection, makes it much more difficult for a photographer because you can no longer rely on autofocus, because autofocus will go crazy trying to focus either on the people in the picture or the protective netting. So I became someone used very comfortable with manual focus for these pictures. Let's see. We'll talk about these guys, but these are the mascots for Milwaukee, and I think you can probably predict what they are. Other baseball related pictures. Here's myself getting my kielbasa at the stadium at Miller Park. And outside, a tribute to Bob Uecker and a tribute also to Henry Aaron. Hank Aaron finished his career with the Brewers in 1975 and 1976. Those might be the only pictures that I have for this particular ballpark on this slide. So I'm going to continue with the bullets. The Brewers actually were pretty well matched. Both of these teams had a sub 500 record coming into the game, but they were pretty evenly matched based upon their record at least. And in this game, there were a good number of people in the stands. It was a day game. I think it was a day game during the week, and there were like 35,000 fans there. So it was a very well attended game. The Brewers outhit the Diamondbacks 9-7, but they scored 3 runs in the 6th to take the lead, never gave it up, and ended up with a 6-4 win versus the Diamondbacks. And again, this is a link to the box score if you would like to see more details about the game. Okay. Third bullet asks another question. Where did the Brewers move from? Well, this cap that I'm wearing is the answer to that question. That's actually a major league team that the name of the team no longer exists. It was the Seattle Pilots. They played 1 year, I think it was 1969 in Seattle. And then they moved eventually to Milwaukee to become the Brewers. Now, the Seattle Pilots are significant, and I put the Jim Bouton books here as well. When we were in Seattle, I introduced you to the Ball 4 book by Jim Bouton. And in it, he talks a lot about baseball, but he talks about the players being very human and also getting into a fair amount of shenanigans in what they were doing. Jim Bouton told what many considered to be secrets of the players in that game, and so he lost favor with many of his fellow or former teammates, as well as with some of baseball's leadership. He was ostracized from the Yankees, where he pitched most notably. He was banished from their stadium after he retired, never to return to a old timers game until 1998. So it was about 30 years, and it was only as a result of his son, Mike Bouton, writing a letter of appeal to try and get his dad invited back to one of those old timers games. Ball Four was written in 1970. The book over here, appropriately titled I'm Glad You Didn't Take It Personally, the sequel to Ball Four, was written in 1971. Okay. During the game, the weather was threatening, and I forget what inning it took place, but the roof actually closed, and it only took about 3 minutes for the roof to close, and there was a intermission. The players, I don't think, were on the field during that time. Now, I mentioned as I gave you the quick tour to the stadium related pictures that there was a tribute to Hank Aaron. Here you can see an inside tribute to him. This is the outside tribute to him. And you can see also the outside tribute to longtime broadcaster for the Brewers and former catcher, Bob Uecker. Now, Bob Uecker, a couple of things. First of all, appeared in, of course, that great baseball movie, Major League. But another thing that I found interesting is Bob Uecker's reply to this question. Now, he had some knuckleballers that he needed to catch. And the question was raised, well, Bob, how do you catch a knuckleball pitch? And his answer was, well, you wait until it stops rolling and then you pick it up. I mentioned a little bit earlier that the mascots for Miller Park were the appropriately themed sausages, and there were 5 of them. You can see the one is kind of hidden here, and during the 7th or whatever inning, they run around the park. Probably the highlight of things that we did in Milwaukee outside of going to the game was we went to the art museum, which is really a beautiful facility. I'll point out this is a view of it from the side. This is a view of it kind of head on. And this is a view of it with those wings closed. Interestingly, during the day, when the art museum is open, those wings open up and it looks more like this and that. When the museum closes at 5 o'clock or whatever, those wings close. And you can see several of the images from within the museum. Here, my wife taking a picture. They have some beautiful walkways. This is a wonderful vestibule that looks out on Lake Michigan. They have a restaurant that also looks out on Lake Michigan, and this is, I think, some Manhattan clam that I had there. Plenty of artwork from the art museum indicated here and here. But the highlight again for my wife, who really appreciates glass work, were some of the glass pieces that they have here. And I mentioned Chihuly glass. There was another piece or several pieces of Chihuly glass. We ran into that both in Seattle and then in Corning on the trip up to Toronto. Again, we ran into it here in Milwaukee. But you can see some of the other glass pieces here, here, and I guess that's about it. This is a link to about several hundred other photos from our visit within Milwaukee, both the game and walking around the town as well. We ran into some music right there on the waterfront, close to this area, which is again overlooking Lake Michigan. Discovery World was a science museum that was right there. And I'll close with just a few other comments about Milwaukee. Now, we were only in Milwaukee for a few days, and so we had to prioritize what we did. We did not go to the Harley Davidson Museum, but you can see here a Harley Davidson motorcycle that costs more than cars that you could acquire. So they do not come cheaply. And the other thing that I'll highlight is this is the Milwaukee River, and one of the things they have is the skywalk that takes you between buildings and over the river. I think that's it for episode 21. I want to thank you for your attention. I will close out here and urge you to come back after I post episode 22. Take care.